Hello, everyone. So this week's Parashat Tetzaveh I have a very interesting idea over here, and we start off. He says, "Va'at Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael, v'ikhu elecha shemen zayzach kasis lamar leha'alos ner tamid." So essentially, the aside over here is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling Moshe to command the Jewish people to take the shemen for the menorah. And there's three times over here that it says, there's two times where it says ve'ata, and then it says also elecha. And the really obvious kasha is that l'chayra, it doesn't make any sense. Why is it that Kadosh Baruch Hu is suddenly talking to Moshe Rabbeinu in first person, and that we also know that Moshe Rabbeinu's name is actually not mentioned at all in this parsha? So it says anyway, Der Hashem Moshe Limar. It's saying Ve'ata Tzaveh Yisrael, Ve'ata Akir B'lecha Azar Nechicha. Right? So there's that idea, which is what's Pshat and Moshe Rabbeinu is mentioned, is not named, and what is the real touch of the word Ve'ata? And the other question is what does it mean V'yikhu Elecha Shemen Zayisach? Right? Meaning, what does that mean? They should take it to him. What do those words mean? Why are they taking it to Moshe? And the same thing about Aaron over here. What's up with that? Meaning, why is Moshe taking Aaron to him, being closer to him? What does that mean, and how does it even work? And what is the purpose of it? And then so those are really the questions. And really, we're going to say the answer. I think it's a very, very interesting aside. If you decide this, but we're going to start off by quoting the famous, the Medrash. It basically says that Moshe Rabbeinu in Parshas Kisisa says the following thing. He says to Hashem, he says, "Forgive the Jewish people," and he says, "Ve'im ayin," and if not, "Mecheni na misifrecha asher kasavta." Moshe Rabbeinu says to God, if you're not going to forgive the Jewish people, then I want you to erase my name from the book that you wrote. In other words, referring to the Torah. And the Meforshim speak out over there that if God wouldn't have meaning we wouldn't have forgiven the Jewish people, then Moshe Rabbeinu is basically saying that he wanted to have never existed, because as is known, which is that everything that ever happened and is happening and will happen is in the Torah, and therefore if Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not in the Torah anymore, then his existence is gone. And that would be, if Hashem wouldn't have forgiven the Jewish people. And the Medrash speaks out that here Sirach says via Misifrika Mikol Hatera Kula. Shalayam Rolai Shalit Kedar Levakistan Racham. Right? So that's what he's saying. So he's Vakish Torah Kula, and if that's what happens, then there's nothing to talk about. Moshe Rabbeinu ceases to ever have existed and to exist in the present. That's what he's asking. And the Medrash speaks out. I have to see if I can find it before it's over here now. But the Medrash speaks out that the famous Gemara that says that Akil as Talmid Chacham if a Talmid Chacham curses, he makes a klala afilu al t'nai hi miskayemes. The curse that he curses is miskayem afilu al t'nai, right? That's what the Gemara says. So even though Moshe Rabbeinu said that you should only wipe his name out of the Sefer Torah, if God didn't forgive the Jewish people, and that was the Tanai, if you don't forgive, wipe me out. But since he was Talmid Chacham, and Kilas Talmid Chacham, the curse of Talmid Chacham, afilu Tanai miskayemes. So the curse of Moshe, or the asking of Moshe that he should be wiped out from the Sefer Torah, was mikuyim to a certain degree, and where that was mikuyim was in Parshas Tetzaveh. Because if you look through the entire parsha, you'll never find his name mentioned once. And when it refers to him as Ve'ata and Elecha. So really what we have to understand is what does that really mean that his mention is not named? What significance does it have? And why is Parshat Tetzaveh chosen for that? And what is the relationship between that aspect of Moshe not having his name mentioned, and the connection between that and the menorah, and that and Aaron the Kohen and the Kahuna? That's really what we have to understand, because in other words, in the pshat of what we're saying, and what we show that the Medrash and Chazal say, which is that if it's the Ata that's commanding, right, and you're taking to Elecha, right, with no name, just Elecha, then essentially what that means is that the things that God is saying that Moshe as Ata should take are the things that somehow have a deep correlation, and they're necessary for them to be established through this idea of Va'ata, which we have to understand what that idea is, but we also want to know what the correlation between the Aaron, the Kohen, the Aaron and the menorah is to that. So we'll start off by explaining what the idea of the Va'ata is, and what it means that the curse, the klala of Moshe Rabbeinu of Im Ay Mechenina was mekuyim to a certain degree. And that is the following thing. Moshe Rabbeinu, and this is also brought down in the Medrash, Moshe Rabbeinu, what he essentially did in Parashat Kisisa, and then, to learn, I guess I'm going according to the sheet that I would say that in physical Metzias, the Tzava is occurring after Parashat Kisisa. And essentially, what's going on, I mean, you would have to say that according to Chazal, because Chazal are the ones that say that Parashat Tetzaveh was the kiyum of the kala, and if the kala didn't happen before the Parashat Tetzaveh, then it wouldn't make sense for it to be mekuyim there. So I think that anyways you have to say that. But the main Ikri Yesod is like this, is that Moshe Rabbeinu was someone, when he said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I am Mechenina. So essentially, what you have in a role of a leader, or the role of a member of a klal, there's really at least two that we're going to refer to, two types of relationships to it. There is a relationship in which you have a individual self, there is who you are, and then there is a level, people are very complex, so there's in the structure of a Noah presence identity, they have a national identity, within which the importance is about the entirety of the nation of whom they're a part of. Then you have an individual identity, and the importance to that identity is your own individual self and your own life. So that is one way that most people actually relate to Klal Yisrael, which is that it is a darga of their identity. It's part of what they are. When Moshe Rabbeinu went ahead and he said, "V'im ayin mechenina misifraka," so he said, "Baruch is going to wipe the Jewish people out." Moshe Rabbeinu says, "You know what? If you're going to wipe them out, I don't want to exist. I don't want to ever have existed. I wanted that my name should not be anywhere in the Torah." So even though it's true that that wasn't Miskayim, what the act that Moshe did was essentially a sacrificial act. In other words, he said like this, he said he decided to tie the essence of what he was to the life force and of Klal Yisrael. So if God wipes out the Jewish people, he says to God, I want you to wipe me out too. I don't want to exist if the Jewish people are not going to exist. And what that did was a very, very, very consequential, deep idea that occurred, which was that Moshe Rabbeinu went from being a human, a person, a being that represented the Jewish people. He went from someone who represented them and communicated to them and cared about them, from being their essence, from being to the point that his national identity subsumed his individual identity, and all that mattered to him was the Jewish nation, and his entire life's worth and existence in his own mind and in reality was tied directly to the Jewish people's existence. That's what that did. And essentially, the way that works is like this. When we say that if someone has a name, right, so that there's a name Moshe, if you look at in Parashas Bereshis and you examine the origin of names, you will come to realize that the reality of the idea of a name is, and this is intuitive, but it's in Parashas Bereshis as well, is that a name is a description of an identity structure which is meant to be used as a manner through which this being relates to the world around it. So, if you so that is essentially the description of that is what a name is, right? When you have a name, that's what people call you. That's the point of it, right? So, in other words, I call you Moshe. That's the way that I relate to you. So, the name is a word used for other people to relate to me, which means that the concept of a name, by definition, is a concept which works within a structure of appearance, meaning it's a social, it's a mechanism that has validity in terms of the human being's interaction with those around him. That is the sphere in which name exists. Therefore, when Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned in Parashat Tetzaveh, although it is a kiyum of what he said, it speaks to an unbelievable maila, which is that Moshe Rabbeinu in Parashat Tetzaveh does not function as an individual with a specific name through which people can relate to him and he can define his mission in the world and how he's going to change those around him. That's not how Moshe Rabbeinu is taking action in this parsha. The way that he's taking action is ve'ata. If we think about the word ve'ata, it literally means and you, which means HaKadosh Baruch Hu was saying to him, not the name, but and you. He's saying to Moshe, you. What does you mean? You means the essence of what you are. You, the you. Not in terms of the way that you relate to the world around you, just the pure you. The you. And what does that mean, the pure you? That's what we've explained until now, that the pure you of Moshe Rabbeinu, the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu, it could be said that it's the description of Bein Adam La'atzmo, right? That could be, we can say that, I'm not sure. But the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu as a individual whom exists on an objective level, on a level that it does not relate to those around him, but rather as he exists, period, is that Moshe Rabbeinu has become, because of his actions in Parshat Kisisa, he has become the life force, the essence of a Klal Yisrael. That is what it means. That it means that all of Klal Yisrael is based within and owes their existence to Moshe Rabbeinu. Because that's what happens when you tie your existence to the entire nation, and due to that tying of your existence to the nation, they're allowed to continue to exist, which is what happened in Parshas Kisisa. So Moshe Rabbeinu encompasses all the Jewish people in his identity, in what he is. And therefore, that is the ve'ata. Ve'ata tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael, v'yikhu eilecha, means that the establishment of the mitzvah of Neiros, of the menorah, and the establishment of the mitzvah of, not the mitzvah, but of the kahuna and the kohanim, those two things are established and are created through the person and through the event, really, of the fact that a person sacrificed his life, or was willing to sacrifice his life, for the sake of the Jewish people. That is what that means. So in other words, Moshe Rabbeinu as Ve'ata, and they're taking oil to him, and Moshe Rabbeinu did actually light the menorah the first time, and he did do the karbanos in the Yemei Miluim, and he was the Kohen Gadol before Aaron was. So when it says Ve'ata and then Hakrev Eilecha, when we're saying that Hakrev Eilecha, what that means is it is through you as the Ve'ata, as the person who gave up his life for the Jewish people. It is through their relationship to you, Moshe, that now they can be established as people and as vessels that will allow for the continuance of the Jewish people and of the way that the Jewish nation will operate. That is the simple touch. And we actually find a very interesting theme, which is the following. It says over here, Rashi says, Va'ales ner tamid. So Rashi says, Madlik achetehei shalheves ola me'ileha. What that means is that you should be madlik the menorah until the shalheves, the flame, will go up on its own. That's what Rashi says over here. And we also have in Parshas Beha'alescha. In Parshas Beha'alescha, it says Hashem tells to Aaron, and he says Beha'alescha saneres. And the reason why I'm bringing this is because it's the exact same two things. So what were the two things that we said that the Moshe as Ve'ata had to establish? The menorah and the kahuna, right? Aaron. And in this parsha as well, in Bamidbar, the whole sugya over here is that Aaron thought that his role was not going to be was not wanted by Hashem, because he didn't get to do the Chanukah of the Mizbeach, and then the parsha also talks about Bahalos Chayis. So in other words, the mitzvah of menorah and the kahuna of Aaron, and what those two things are being connected over here, and it's being spoken about in terms of the essence of what the two things are. So in other words, Aaron is worried that God doesn't want him because he didn't get to participate in the Mishkan. So God says to him, no, Aaron, don't worry. Your share of the participation and your relationship with me is greater than the other people's. You know why? Because you're being made of the Neros. And not only so meaning it can't be a coincidence that Aaron HaKohen in Parashat Baloscha is being consulted through the menorah, and it's not a coincidence that those same exact two things were the same things that had to be established through Moshe Rabbeinu as the Ve'ata, as the person who gave up his life for the Jewish people. That's not a coincidence. Obviously, there's an idea that there's some sort of special relationship between the kahuna and the menorah, and that special relationship is going to exist through the fact that they both were established by Moshe Rabbeinu as the Ve'ata. And the third factor that also you see in Parashat Beha'aloscha is the word Beha'aloscha is Shecharech Lahadak Rashi Ad Shalheves Olem Me'ileha. And that is the exact same lashon that we had in our parsha. The Rashi says Va'ata Tetzaveh Va'ales Ner Madlik Ad Shalheves Olem Me'ileha. So you see that this Rashi and this idea of Ad Shalheves Olem Me'ileha occurs by both, and I think that it could be used for the underlying connection of what is occurring. And that is that the 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 Medrash Rash Ba'alescha speaks out that the idea, and there's many ideas of the Neros, but one of the idea of the Neros is that one of the idea of the Neros is that it is meant as being. Here we go. So it says, "Amalek Hakadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Lo Bishul Shani Tzarich L'Neros Yisharti on Neros El Zak Kaisam Shenemar V'Yin Himi Or Shrei Ksiv Gam Chaysh L'Chajim Echa." So he doesn't need, Hakadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need the Neros. So why is he doing that? Is Kedei L'Zak Kaisam, because as it says, Hashem Chafei Taman Tzidko. So that's one thing it says. The other thing it says is that what? That, yeah, okay, so that's enough for our purposes. So what is going on with the Neres? Just obviously Hakadosh Baruch Hu doesn't require the Neres, because it says in Nohira Ima Shrei that light is with Hakadosh Baruch Hu at all times. So why is Hakadosh Baruch Hu making the Neres? It's making the Neres because it is an opportunity for us to do to give light to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore it is an expression of our desire to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, when we say that we're making, a menorah for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and so there should be light in his house, what that means is, and essentially what the Medrash is saying, is that the concept of the Mishkan in general, as brought out by the menorah in terms of the fact that the menorah speaks to Or, which is essentially gives, it is the basis of everything else in the manner that it allows everything else to be seen, is the concept that we, even though God doesn't need anything that we are doing, but it's not about the toitza'ah of what's occurring. It's about the effort that's put in terms of the show of desire of relating that the Jewish people have when they make the menorah. That is the aside of what's going on. When it comes to the Mishkan, when it comes to the relationship with Kadosh Baruch Hu, the way that the relationship to God is measured is not in terms of output. It's measured in terms of input, even if the output is very little. And that's true. I mean, that's all over Chazal. That and that statement of Echad Amar Be'Echad Amamit is not a statement that is meant to console anybody. It's a statement regarding the fact of the way that our relationship with God works. God is not interested in your output. He controls everything. He controls all the possible output. He's interested in the effort that you make. That is all that he's interested in, because all God is interested in is a relationship. So why, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need the light, obviously, so why is he telling us to make something that has light, that there could be light? It's because we should be able to say that we gave light to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, God doesn't need that light, but it's irrelevant because God doesn't care about the totzah of the issue. He cares about the fact that we had a desire to create a home for God in which there is light. So the yesod of the entire concept of menorah is the concept that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us. It was made in order so that we can have a continual expression of a desire of relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is what it was made for, meaning that it is the ultimate vessel in the Mishkan which has no purpose in terms of an output, and therefore it is the vessel that shows that everything is only in terms of our own input and effort. And that is essentially in order for Klal Yisrael to have schusim, so that they can go on and that they can relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a pure, totally identity level, emotional level based issue. And in that way. And because of the nature of that, that is why Moshe Rabbeinu, as Ve'ata, is the one who had to establish it. Because only a being which has no self-agenda and his entire essence was devoted to the existence of the Jewish people so that they can relate to God, has the ability to establish such a kli, which its purpose is meant to show the purity of the Jewish people's desire to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Due to the piece that we just spoke about, because it has no output, only the input, because God doesn't need the light. And the same thing is true with the establishment of Kohanim, because Kohanim, as is well known, Kohanim are the job of Aaron HaKohen, and who Aaron was, as the Medrash says, is have a right of what does it say? Having Talmid of Shal Aaron, Ayev Shalom v'Roid of Shalom. Aaron HaKohen was someone who is constantly Roid of Shalom. He's constantly chasing peace. And what does that mean that he was chasing peace? What it means is, and it's the same thing as Moshe Rabbeinu's essence, what he was doing when he asked God to forgive them, but it's in a different way, which is that Aaron HaKohen was essentially on a national level. He went around all of Klal Yisrael, and he solved problems of shalom bayis, and he created shalom. He created peace, harmony. And it's brought out, there's a story in Avos that talks about it, that there was once a story that someone in the generation of Aaron said to his wife that I make a neder that I don't want to have anything to do with you unless you spit in the eyes of the Kohen Gadol. And Aaron HaKohen heard about it, and he went to the woman and he begged her to spit in his eyes. And she did, and then the husband got back together. The husband and the wife got back together. And so essentially that story is just, obviously it was probably only one story, but it brought out the extremity of the lengths that Aaron HaKohen was willing to go to, and how his whole essence was about promoting shalom. And the idea of the promotion of shalom basically is the concept and the structure which holds things together and merges them together and makes them what they are. So that is also why the establishment of such a position had to be created through the actions and doing of a being whose entire essence was tied to the very life force of Klal Yisrael. After saying V'im Ayim Mechenina. And in terms of the Neros and how the Neros are connected, you have over here, it says over here in the Medrash something very, very interesting. It says, Daber over here, Daber el Aaron, Mati el Bas Neres, the Kabanos, Kozmach, Bezamish Kayam, Binogim, Aval Neres, the Olam, and Mopina Noyer Iru, the Chol Habrachos, Shenasati, Lechal, Levareches Banai, Einan Betelin Leolam. All the brachos that I gave you to be mevarech my children are never going to be bata olam. So, what is that Medrash saying? The Medrash is saying the following type. It's saying that the brachos, that the Kohanim bless the Jewish people, right? The brachos, they say, that the Kohanim are saying that that is this yisod. That is the type, that the Kohanim are the conduit through which God blesses the Jewish people, which means that their entire role is to be the basis of blessing and of continued existence for the Jewish people, which is exactly what the essence of Moshe Rabbeinu was when he said, "V'im ayin mechenina." which is why it is Hakrev Elecha, to you, the Aaron HaKohen. So that is the aside over here. And lastly, we'll end off with the connection of the two Rashis that we found by Baal Oscha and Tetzaveh, which he says that the aside of in the menorah is that it has to be Oile Ashnei Shaleves Oile Meileha. And this is probably a famous word, but it's said that, and it ties very directly into the entire idea that we just said. The idea of Ashnei Shaleves Oile Meileha is the pshat that the manner in which a person relates to and to the people around him and to his community should be in a way where he is able to either say something or do something or institute something that is not just something that he can say, oh, look what I did, look what I showed, or my plaque is on the wall, or something that he can talk about, whatever. It should be something that you can be madlik, and you can light something, you can put it in, and then it perpetuate itself and be ola me'ileha. And that is a manner in which of a way in which you can relate to the things around you. And in that way that you relate to the things around you, you're able to inspire in someone an inspiration, right? Just like the ner, and that ner can be oila me'ileha. But the only way that a person is capable of relating to someone in a way that he can create a ner, an inspiration, a desire to do good that ultimately will be oleh me'ileha, that will take on a sense of independence, is if that person, in the moment that he is relating, takes on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu of Ve'ata, which means that he realizes that at least in the moment, in the time that he is doing the act for the community, or he is relating to his fellow Jew, trying to inspire, it has to be not that he is imparting some sort of message that he has, or that he wants to feel a certain way or think of himself as someone who is a community person. None of that nonsense, but rather he has to dip into a complete sense of dedication and of realization of himself and of his identity as simply someone who is a part of the Jewish people and has a desire for the Jewish people to do good and become better and succeed.